What did the world look like before the Great Flood? Step into a world shrouded in mystery, where ancient creatures and long-extinct lifestyles once thrived. It was an era of extraordinary proportions, where people who lived for hundreds of years, as well as the legends of giants and enigmatic civilizations, captured the imagination. Welcome to the Pre-Diluvian era, a time enveloped in curiosity and wonder, chronicled in the early chapters of the book of Genesis. According to biblical accounts, the Pre-Diluvian period witnessed remarkable human achievements, but it was also marred by a culture permeated by sin. Join us in this video as we journey into the past, uncovering the mysteries of the Pre-Diluvian era, discovering the daily lives of these ancient people and the events that unfolded in a world long forgotten. What were the daily lives of those ancient people like? What events unfolded in the world preceding the cataclysmic Great Flood? Before we dive into this topic, I kindly ask for your support by liking this video, sharing with others who have similar interests, and subscribing to our channel, so you will never miss any of our daily uploads. Come with me on this fascinating journey as we explore these world-long forgotten events together. Let's begin. Before the Great Flood, as described in the early chapters of the Bible, the world was vastly different from what we know today. In the book of Genesis, we encounter a time in early human history characterized by long lifespans, divine interactions with humans, and a close relationship with God and creation. The stories of Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, and eventually Noah offer glimpses into a relatable life during that era. Various factors converge to bring about the occurrence of the flood. Even before the creation of the world, there was an event involving Satan and the fallen angels. This event was the creation of the sons of God. In the book of Job, God reveals an event that took place before the world's creation. Job, chapter 38, verses 4-7 describes the foundation of the earth, the measurements, and the celestial beings known as morning stars and sons of God rejoicing in God's glory, power, and wisdom. It's important to note that the Bible only briefly mentions the fallen angels, since the majority of angels in heaven have remained faithful and have not turned to evil. However, some angels made the choice to rebel and have fallen from their original heavenly dwelling, even though it was intended to be their eternal home. The cause of this rebellion is not explicitly stated. Nonetheless, we cannot disregard the fact that angels possess free will, and their fallen state can be attributed to their exercise of free will. The book of Jude emphasizes this point, stating that some angels did not remain in their proper place but abandoned their heavenly abode. Jude chapter 5-6, Amplified Bible. Now, it is important to remind you that the Lord, after delivering the people from the land of Egypt, later destroyed those who did not believe and refused to trust, obey, and rely on Him. The angels who did not keep their designated place of power but abandoned their proper dwelling were kept in eternal chains under the thick gloom of utter darkness, awaiting judgment on the great day. The Jewish people acknowledged that these angels did not remain in their rightful domain. The phrase proper domain can be understood as either their rule or their original position. Angels were specifically created to dwell in heaven, worship God, and carry out His commands. They were designed to bring glory to Him, just as humans were designed to dwell on earth. Despite this, some angels deviated from their original purpose by leaving their heavenly abode. Satan, who disguises himself as an angel of light, is in charge of these rebellious angels and acts as their leader. The Great Rebellion, as it is sometimes referred to, was an event where Satan and a faction of heaven's angelic legions waged war against God and His angels, attempting to overthrow God's authority in the eternal realm. However, the devil's plot to overthrow God ultimately resulted in his defeat, along with the angels who followed him. Jesus Himself witnessed this event and spoke of the glory and majesty He shared with God the Father before the world existed. In John chapter 17 verse 5, Amplified Bible, Jesus declares, "Now, Father, Glorify me together with yourself, with the glory and majesty that I had with you before the world existed. This reveals that even before the creation of the earth, God and his Son shared a majestic existence. It is important to note that Satan is much more than a red figure with horns and a pitchfork. He is an ancient being with real spiritual power, which he utilizes for evil and selfish purposes. As Paul mentioned, our struggle is not against flesh and blood. We are engaged in a wrestling match of a spiritual nature. Satan's kingdom is highly organized, with various areas and levels of authority, and its headquarters are in the heavenly realms. This fact may be staggering, but it becomes clear that Satan leads a highly organized kingdom when we consider the many indications of this reality. In the Bible, a spiritual war began, a clash between two kingdoms. One kingdom is ruled by God, the Prince of Peace, while the other is ruled by Satan, the Prince of Darkness. After being expelled from heaven, Satan and his followers formed a rebel kingdom, pledging themselves to each other. In the Garden of Eden, Satan launched his first attack on God's authority on earth. He saw Adam and Eve as invaders in his territory, considering the earth his domain. If God created mankind to establish his kingdom on earth, Satan needed a plan of attack. In the perfect garden, there was a special tree called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God instructed Adam and Eve that they could eat from any tree in the garden except for this one. Satan, the old serpent, made his way to Eve and employed 3 strategic tactics against her. The first tactic was doubt. Has God indeed said? Genesis chapter 3 verse 1. The deceiver sought to sow seeds of doubt in Eve's mind. His second strategy was supposition, making Eve question whether the consequences of disobedience would actually lead to death. As God had stated, "You will not surely die." Genesis chapter 3 verse 4. Finally, Satan used temptation as his third and final approach. God was disappointed by their disobedience, and Adam and Eve could no longer remain in the Garden of Eden. They had already made the mistake of eating the forbidden fruit. Satan's subversive counterattack overwhelmed them, but God established a beachhead in the garden. He promised that the serpent's head would be bruised by the seed of the woman, reversing the tables on the tempter. Before driving Adam and Eve out of the garden, God demonstrated his complete mastery over Satan. The story of Cain and Abel, the first murder, is found in Genesis chapter 4. Some have pointed out that the sin committed by the first man, Adam, led to the second man, Cain, killing the third, Abel. Despite being banished from the garden, God continued to bless Adam and Eve. They had 2 sons, Cain and Abel, and both were aware of the importance of making offerings to their Creator. While God was pleased with Abel and his offering, he was not pleased with Cain and his offering. This infuriated Cain, and despite God's warning for him to master sin, he deceived his brother, murdered him, buried him, and disowned him. Cain asked, "Am I my brother's keeper?" fearing that others might seek vengeance for his crime. God placed a mark on Cain to protect him, declaring that anyone who killed him would suffer vengeance 7 times over. Genesis chapter 4 verse 15. Cain was punished by becoming a restless wanderer away from his home and family. He went to live in a place called the land of Nod, east of Eden. In the land of Nod, Cain built a city named after his son Enoch. His descendants included influential people of their time such as Jubal, the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock, Jubal, the father of all who play stringed instruments and pipes, and Tubal-Cain, who forged tools out of bronze and iron. Genesis chapter 4 verses 17 to 22. Following Cain's punishment, the story shifts to 2 families, a recurring theme in Genesis. Unfortunately, Cain's violent ways were passed down through his family line. We find a man boasting about his own violence, and as we progress through the generations, evil spreads. God's perfect design is only 4 chapters old, and already people are reveling in bloodshed and disregarding his design for marriage. Before the flood, polygamy was also practiced among Cain's descendants, departing from the original design of 1 man and 1 woman in marriage. In contrast to Cain's lineage, a new family tree was established. God gave Eve a son named Seth in place of Abel. Seth followed the same type of worship as his deceased brother Abel. People began to invoke the Lord's name in connection with Seth, while Cain's way of worship was prideful and self-centered. The humble way of worship, exemplified by Abel and Seth, calls out to God. Jude, chapter 11. It is no surprise that when God needed an obedient servant hundreds of years later, he chose Noah from Seth's lineage. Cain's legacy was complicated. On one hand, he and his family were innovative in coming up with new ideas and ways of doing things. On the other hand, they struggled with fighting and hurting others, and this tendency seemed to worsen over time. This struggle between our potential for great good and our capacity for great evil became a symbol of what it means to be human. As generations passed after Adam, the world became populated but also filled with sin. People were unkind to one another, engaging in lies, theft, and even murder. During this period, people lived extraordinarily long lives, numbering in the hundreds. It was a different era, a time when humanity was closely connected to its origins and the world itself was younger and fresher. Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters after Cain and Abel, and as their family grew, so did the birth of civilization itself. According to the Bible, after Seth was born to Adam, he lived for 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Genesis chapter 5 verse 4. As Adam and Eve's children grew, they married and started families of their own, leading to a steady population increase. Apart from Cain and Abel, Seth was another son of Adam who had descendants, including Enoch, Methuselah, and eventually Noah. Adam, the first man, lived to be 930 years old. Genesis chapter 5 verse 5. Yes, you heard that right. 9 centuries. He had children who also lived extraordinarily long lives. Seth, his son, lived for 912 years. Genesis chapter 5 verse 8. And Seth's son Enoch lived for 905 years. Genesis chapter 5 verse 11. As the generations passed, each man fathered children and taught them the ways of the earth, including cultivating land, caring for animals, and connecting with God. This lineage of people carried the seed of humanity's first union with fallen angels. Despite their long lives and deep wisdom, these early people were not immune to the problems that often plagued mankind, such as jealousy, anger, and sometimes even violence. However, there was a man named Enoch. In Genesis chapter 5, we encounter the first mention of Enoch. It's important to note that there is another Enoch who was the son of Cain, but this is a different Enoch. Genesis chapter 5 verse 21. When Enoch was 65 years old, he became the father of Methuselah. Through studying the genealogies in the Bible, we discover that Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah. Genesis chapter 5 verses 22-24. The Bible states that Enoch walked with God. In an era when most of his peers were focused on their own lives and raising their children, Enoch stood out like a breath of fresh air. Though his life was not as long as some of the other men, his testimony was remarkable. He had a close-knit communion and fellowship with God, so much so that when it was time for him to leave the earth, God took him without experiencing death as we know it. This short yet weighty description of Enoch's pure walk with God serves as a template for many people throughout different generations, teaching us to live for an audience of one and passionately seek a close relationship with God. Genesis chapter 5 verse 24. Enoch's case is the first recorded instance of a rapture-like event where God simply took him. Perhaps the fellowship between Enoch and God was so intense that the presence of God enveloped and whisked him away. The book of Hebrews mentions these men of whom the world was not worthy, and Enoch is among them. Despite the beauty of Enoch's life, his era was not without its challenges. People lived long lives, but not always well. With many years at their disposal, they had ample time to perfect their skills, build things, and explore the earth. However, they also had more time to make mistakes, stray from God's path, and let their hearts harden. This eventually led to a world corrupted and far from its divine origins. The population grew, tribes and families expanded and spread, and new territories were claimed as homes. With the increasing population, the need for different roles and professions arose. People couldn't solely be herders and farmers anymore. They needed to diversify. Cain, for example, worked the ground, while his brother Abel tended to sheep. This early differentiation suggests that roles were defined based on needs and skill sets. Tubal-Cain, a descendant of Cain, became an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron, indicating the emergence of specialized professions like metalworking. Musicians also made their appearance, with Jubal, another descendant of Cain, being the father of all who play the harp and flute. These roles allowed society to become more complex and organized, laying the groundwork for advanced forms of civilization. However, despite the acquisition of new skills and the development of various professions, life before the Great Flood was far from perfect or happy. The Bible tells us that the wickedness of humanity had become great on the earth, with every inclination of their thoughts being evil all the time. Genesis chapter 6 verse 5. In a nutshell, before the flood, humanity expanded and diversified. Families evolved into tribes, and roles transformed into professions, giving rise to the early stages of civilization. However, during this time, the self-appointed commander of the kingdom of darkness, Satan, summoned his evil legions to infiltrate humanity with the intent of corrupting the line leading to the Messiah. Genesis chapter verses 1 to 2. As the human population increased on earth, daughters were born to them. The term sons of God in this context can be interpreted as angels or demons, characterized as heavenly beings. The book of Job refers to them as angels, with 2/3 remaining with God, while 1/3, led by Satan, became fallen angels. Feeling threatened by the thriving kingdom of God, Satan called upon his evil legions to infiltrate humanity. These fallen angels descended to earth and intermarried with human women, giving birth to the Nephilim, often translated as fallen ones or giants. This satanic invasion corrupted the world, leading to widespread wickedness. It is more accurate to understand the sons of God as either rebellious angels, demons, or uniquely demon-possessed men, while the daughters of men refers to human women. The wickedness of mankind during this time is described in Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 to 5. The early chapters of Genesis, particularly Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 to 5, provide a glimpse into the world before the flood. In Genesis chapter 6 verse 3, the Lord declares that his spirit will not remain with man forever due to their fleshly nature, and limits their lifespan to 120 years. During this time, the Nephilim, the offspring of the union between the fallen angels and human women, were present on earth. These Nephilim became the mighty men of old, renowned for their power and strength. The Lord observed the great wickedness that had permeated mankind, with every intent and thought of their hearts being continuously evil. The earth was a place filled with sin, violence, and moral corruption. In this world, people were driven by their own selfish desires, disregarding honesty, integrity, and kindness. Deceit and manipulation ruled, and society was torn apart by selfishness and wickedness. Families, instead of being sanctuaries of love and support, became battlefields of deceit and betrayal. Neighbors sought to exploit one another rather than looking out for each other. Governments became systems of oppression, upholding the rule of the powerful over the weak. Now, in the midst of this chaotic world, an unusual development occurred: the Nephilim. These beings were distinct from regular humans, possessing extraordinary strength and larger-than-life qualities. However, instead of solving the world's problems, they seemed to exacerbate them. The Nephilim were admired, feared, and even worshipped, pulling people further away from the true God who had created them. Their might made them objects of fascination, but they were part of a world spiraling deeper into chaos and sin. It was in this context that God observed the increasing wickedness of mankind, the spiritual and moral decline that had taken hold. The crown jewel of creation, humanity had lost its way. Instead of living in harmony with one another and the world, people were consumed by violence, wickedness, and deceit. God looked upon his creation and felt immense sorrow. The Bible describes how the Lord regretted making human beings on earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. This divine grief transcended human understanding. It was as if a parent was heartbroken over the actions of a wayward child, but infinitely magnified. In his great pain, God made a difficult decision. The Amplified Bible, Genesis chapter 6 verse 7, states that God said, "I will destroy and annihilate mankind, whom I have created from the surface of the earth." God's grief over mankind's sin and his regret for creating them led him to the decision to bring destruction upon the world. He was upset by the actions of his creation and saw no other option to heal a world spiraling into chaos. However, even in the midst of this dark chapter of human history, there was a glimmer of hope: a man named Noah. Genesis 6:8 tells us that Noah found favor and grace in the eyes of the Lord. While the world had gone astray, Noah stood out as a beacon of hope, a man of integrity and faith. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his evil generation, and he walked in habitual fellowship with God. He descended from the lineage of Adam through Seth, Enoch, Cain, and other righteous ancestors who carried the torch of righteousness through the generations. Eventually, this lineage led to Noah, a man who not only carried the torch but allowed it to shine brightly in his life. Noah was not only a righteous man but also a loving father and faithful husband. He instilled in his children the same virtues he carried in his heart. Despite the surrounding darkness, Noah's household became a sanctuary of godliness. Even when God shared his sorrowful decision to cleanse the earth of wickedness through a flood that would drown every living thing, Noah's faith did not waver. Understanding the gravity of the task ahead, Noah accepted it with a heavy yet resolute heart. God declared that he would put an end to all people and the earth due to the violence that had filled it. Genesis chapter 6 verse 13 states, "I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth." Recognizing Noah's righteousness, God deemed him worthy to be the custodian of a new beginning for humanity. Despite being mocked and doubted by those around him, Noah faithfully carried out God's instructions. He spent years building the ark, warning people about the impending flood, and patiently awaiting the moment when God would seal him and his family inside this enormous wooden refuge. As the sky finally broke open and the earth was engulfed in water, Noah's virtues became the cornerstone for a new world. His faithfulness and obedience preserved life, and from his lineage emerged a nation on a cleansed earth. In a world spiraling into chaos, Noah's light shone the brightest, a testament to the enduring power of virtue and faith in the face of overwhelming darkness. God made a covenant with Noah, as described in Genesis chapter 6 verses 17 to 22. The ark became Noah's family sanctuary, a vessel that would carry them above the waters that would soon cover the earth. God instructed Noah to construct the ark using gopher wood, with rooms inside and outside covered in pitch. God provided Noah with precise dimensions, designs, and plans for the ark. This was no ordinary boat. It was a special ship designed to save the remaining living things during the worldwide flood. The ark was to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, equipped with a door, a window and multiple levels. Converting these dimensions to modern measurements, the ark would be approximately 450 feet long, 75 feet wide and 45 feet tall. It would have a door, a window, and it would be divided into different floors. God said to Noah, "This is how you shall make it." Genesis chapter 6 verse 15. Noah embarked on the monumental task of constructing the ark. Despite facing ridicule and questioning of his sanity, Noah remained steadfast in his faith. As the years passed, the wood took shape and a magnificent ark stood tall, an undeniable testament to Noah's obedience and faithfulness. God also instructed Noah on who and what to bring into the ark. Alongside Noah's wife, his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, Noah was to bring 2 of every living creature, male and female, to keep them alive. Additionally, God commanded Noah to bring 7 pairs of clean animals, a male and his female, and 2 of each unclean animal, a male and his female. Furthermore, Noah was to bring 7 pairs of birds of the air, male and female, to ensure their species' survival on earth. Genesis chapter 7 verses 2 to 3. Noah faithfully carried out all of God's commands, doing everything just as God had instructed him. Genesis chapter 6 verse 22. Thank you for joining us today on this fascinating journey. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who have similar interests. Also, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts and any other biblical topics you'd like us to explore in future videos. Until next time, may the hope of resurrection and the assurance of God's power over death bring you comfort and strength. God bless you.